Welcome to the new private pesticide applicator training. My name is Mary Ann Rose, and I'm the director of the Ohio Pesticide Safety Education Program. This is Module 5, Handling and Storing Pesticides Safely. Your storage area must be secure. Ideally, you will keep your pesticides in a locked cabinet or building so that access is controlled. You want to identify your storage area with signs including non-smoking. And be sure to locate pesticide storage in an area where, if there is a spill, surface or groundwater or other sensitive sources of water will not be contaminated. Keep an eye on your pesticide storage. Routinely inspect the containers to be sure they're intact and firmly sealed. As much as possible, keep pesticides in their original container with a pesticide label firmly attached. If it ever becomes necessary to transfer a pesticide into another container, attach the pesticide label and never use a food storage container. This is illegal and has resulted in fatalities. Keep a spill kit on hand in your storage area to deal with the unexpected. Other best practices for chemical storage include keeping volatile products in a separate storage compartment or sealed in containers, keeping herbicides separate from other pesticide products to prevent accidental crop injury in case of a mix-up, using non-porous shelving and floors that won't absorb pesticides, keeping dry materials above liquids so if there's a leak, the dry materials aren't contaminated. And then finally, the ideal storage area will have good ventilation, good lighting, and climate control, because many pesticides will not be effective if they go through a freeze-thaw cycle. If you use service containers, and this is something that's used to temporarily store pesticide or a dilute mixture of pesticides, such as a backpack sprayer, you want to clearly label the service containers. Even if you intend to perhaps store them that way only for a temporary amount of time, sometimes the service containers remain longer and people forget what's in them. Ohio pesticide law does have requirements for pesticide storage. It is necessary to store pesticides away from all food, feed, seed, and fertilizer. For bulk pesticide storage and bulk distribution sites, there are special requirements. Bulk is considered more than 55 gallons of liquid and more than 100 pounds of dry. In the bulk distribution site, you cannot have a drain in the floor of the storage area, or the drain must be plugged. This is also considered a good practice for any chemical storage area. When transporting pesticides, be sure to anchor securely. Never transport pesticides in the passenger compartment or with food, feed, and seed. Never leave the product unattended on the back of the truck to avoid theft or tampering with the pesticides. Now, when transporting bulk containers, make sure to transport only in the manufacturer's approved container with the labeling attached. Bulk containers also may have special Department of Transportation requirements. Finally, for all pesticides, make sure when you're transporting them, keep the labels intact and keep a spill kit handy on your truck. While mixing and loading pesticides, if you are drawing directly from a water source, you must protect the water supply with either a mechanical anti-siphon device or keep an air gap between the water source and the top of the tank, or the top of the pesticide mixture in the tank. So Ohio pesticide law requires the air gap between the water source and the highest level in the tank to be 1.5 times the width of the source outlet. So if your source of water, for example, is a pipe and it measures 1 inch, then the air gap, must be 1.5 inches. Also consider when you are mixing in the field to make sure you are avoiding sensitive areas, where if there's a spill that could be a problem, such as near a field drain or a ditch where the contamination might flow off site. Avoid leftover tank mix problems by making sure that you calibrate and measure carefully. Even with careful planning, sometimes you may have some unused pesticide tank mix left over. It's never acceptable to dump the remaining tank mix. Use the remainder on a labeled site. And if you are reapplying to some area that you've already made an application to, make sure that the labeled rates are not exceeded. Equipment cleaning also generates pesticide waste. In-field cleaning is always going to be your best option away from any sensitive areas. If you are using a tank cleaning product, make sure you follow the product information and any pesticide label requirements for the tank clean out to the letter. This is especially important to avoid crop injury when you are cleaning out between loads of herbicides and other types of pesticides. Sprayer rinseate also is best sprayed out on a labeled site, or may be reused in the next tank mix of pesticides as long as the next use site is compatible with your pesticide label. Pesticide containers need preparation before they can be discarded. With dry material, simply empty the bag completely. For liquid pesticides, see the pesticide label in storage and disposal section. Typically, the acceptable practice on the label is going to be to triple rinse the product containers. There are also special instructions and special equipment that usually may be used to pressure rinse your pesticide containers. The idea is to rinse the containers immediately after emptying them of pesticide, and then using any rinseate that you generate in the tank mix that you're preparing. Many growers are now using refillable containers that are returned directly to the dealer or manufacturer for cleaning and processing. With empty pesticide containers, never repurpose these for other uses, with the only exception being to replace a container because of damage. So in other words, to use it for a pesticide. Pesticide containers, once they are properly rinsed, should be punctured to prevent reuse and may then be disposed of in an approved landfill. It's good to know about the Ag Container Recycling Council Program, or ACRC recycling program. This is funded by chemical manufacturers. The recycling program will pick up cleaned pesticide containers, 55 gallons and smaller, and recycle them. In most areas of Ohio, there is no collection fee for growers or commercial applicators to use this service. See the website on the slide for more information. What do you do with unneeded pesticides? Well, ideally, you will avoid this problem by buying only what is needed. However, sometimes disposal is unavoidable. First and foremost, always follow label instructions for disposal, and it is never legal to simply dump pesticides down the drain. The chemical could be used up according to label by applying it to any labeled site. It also might be possible to return the product to the manufacturer. For agricultural chemicals only, the Ohio Department of Agriculture offers several locations during the growing season each year for farm chemical disposal. You could contact your local solid waste authority. Sometimes they have community events where pesticides are taken in, or they may accept them at their facility. If the material is a hazardous waste, it only may be disposed of at a permitted hazardous waste disposal facility, or you could contact a hazardous waste disposal company. Now, not all pesticides are classified as hazardous waste. To find out if the pesticide is so classified, call the EPA hotline. Just for example, 2,4-D is in fact hazardous waste. And even careful applicators may someday find themselves in a spill situation. It's important to know what to do and be prepared for this possibility. The 3 C's of spill containment are control, contain, clean up. For control, this is stopping the flow at the source. So did a hose break? If this is the case, what you would do would be to turn off the pump and close the valve. Contain is preventing the pesticide from moving off-site. So for example, do you see the spill or the pesticide flowing towards a culvert? Be prepared to act fast with absorbent materials or by mounding soil between the spill and the culvert. And then finally, clean up. So the objective here is to absorb and remove the pesticide contamination, not to dilute it. You never want to rinse away the pesticide from the site. Having a spill kit with you at all times and knowing how to use it is going to help you react fast in an emergency situation. What and how much you should have on hand is going to depend on what you're spraying and of course the volume of material that you're working with. So the basic spill kit contains additional PPE to protect you while you're cleaning up. For example, gloves, coveralls, additional items depending upon the pesticide that you use. Absorbent materials to soak up the spill. This could be absorbent pillows or a bag of Oil-Zorb. A shovel for damming the flow with soil, or perhaps a shovel will be used to scoop up the absorbent material that you have used. And a dustpan and broom. Plastic bags or containers for removing the contaminated material. And then finally, emergency phone numbers so you know who to call in case of a major spill. So, are you prepared for a spill? And what do you think you should have on hand for the situations that are portrayed here? Spill containment supplies need to be able to contain the amounts that you are transporting. So with these kinds of volumes, a small bag of Oil-Zorb is not likely to do the trick. Here's some information that can be helpful in an emergency. First item, EPA Emergency Spill Hotline. This is for spills of a serious nature. You are required to contact the EPA Spill Reporting Hotline anytime a spill enters a waterway, no matter what the quantity. For hazardous materials, there are certain reportable quantities. The hotline can determine if you fall in that situation. Chemtrec is a 24/7 hotline that provides technical assistance with any type of hazardous substance. So anytime you call an emergency hotline, make sure you have that pesticide label on hand because they will ask you information from that label. Other things to keep in mind when dealing with a spill: don't leave the site until the situation is resolved. Never hose down the site with water. Once again, the goal is to contain the spill, not dilute it. And then make sure that you dispose of waste from a cleanup action properly. The absorbed material full of pesticide needs to be disposed of the same way that you would a pesticide. Okay, now we'll look at a few images and take a short quiz. So what kind of safety concerns do you see in this picture regarding pesticide storage? Now, that's pretty obvious. They're eating in the same room that they're keeping a bunch of pesticide containers. How could you improve the security of this storage site? Well, one of the things that is apparent is there's no lock. Does not appear to have a lock on that. The other thing is that this container is small enough that it might just be picked up and transported someplace. So that might not be the most secure type of storage. Of course, if this were inside of a building and locked, it might be an ideal type of storage area. When transporting pesticides, should you carry them in the passenger compartment? Use a van or a station wagon? Or use enclosed and lockable cargo boxes? The answer in this case is C, because both A and B have the problem of having the pesticides in the same compartment as people, which is something that is not good practice. What is the first thing that should be done if a pesticide container is leaking? Put on personal protective equipment, call the emergency spill hotline, or clean up the spilled material. While of course the objective is going to be to clean up the spilled material, the first thing you should do would probably be to put on a pair of gloves before you start cleaning up. And it's not likely that calling an emergency spill hotline in this situation would be necessary. This is the end of Module 5, Handling and Storing Pesticides Safely. Now you may take the quiz in your course study guide on pages 60 to 65.